The cold water hit Sarah's skin like needles as she stepped into the community shower facility. Steam rose around her, creating a fog that seemed to mirror the uncertainty she felt inside. At 28, she had already accomplished more than most people could dream of. But here, surrounded by the chatter and laughter of other women, she felt completely invisible. The military base housed hundreds of personnel and the shared facilities were always busy. Sarah had learned to shower during off-peak hours, hoping to avoid the crowds and the conversations that made her stomach twist with anxiety. But today her mission briefing had run late, and she had no choice but to use the showers during the evening rush. 3 women stood near the far end of the shower room, their voices carrying clearly through the humid air. Sarah recognized them immediately. They worked in different departments on the base, but their reputations preceded them. Jessica worked in communications, always perfectly put together with her blonde hair never out of place. Maria handled logistics, known for her sharp tongue and quick wit. The third woman, Amanda, managed supplies and seemed to take pleasure in making others feel small. Sarah kept her head down, focusing on her shower routine. She had developed this strategy over the years: blend in, stay quiet, avoid attention. Her small frame and soft-spoken nature made it easy for people to overlook her, and most of the time that was exactly how she preferred it. She had learned early in life that drawing attention often meant drawing trouble, but privacy was impossible in the open shower facility. The 3 women noticed her presence immediately, and their conversation shifted in a way that made Sarah's skin crawl. They spoke just loud enough for her to hear, their words carefully chosen to wound without being overtly confrontational. "Some people really don't belong here," Jessica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I mean, look at her. She's so tiny and timid. What could someone like that possibly contribute to military operations?" Maria laughed, a sound that echoed off the tile walls. "Right? I heard she works in some kind of administrative role, probably filing papers and making coffee for the real soldiers. It's actually kind of sad when you think about it." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her shampoo. She had heard comments like these countless times throughout her career, but they never got easier to bear. People saw her quiet demeanor and average appearance and made assumptions about her capabilities. They saw someone weak, someone who didn't deserve to wear the uniform. Amanda joined the conversation with enthusiasm. "I don't understand why the military even accepts people like her. She looks like she'd cry if someone raised their voice. Can you imagine her in any kind of real situation? She'd probably hide behind the first person she could find." The women continued their cruel commentary, unaware that each word was hitting its target with devastating accuracy. They discussed Sarah's appearance, her perceived lack of fitness, and her quiet nature with the casual cruelty that comes from people who have never faced real adversity themselves. Sarah finished washing her hair, her movements mechanical and precise. She had trained herself not to react to these situations, not to give bullies the satisfaction of seeing her pain, but inside their words were carving deep wounds that she would carry with her, long after the shower was over. The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. These women, who spent their days in comfortable offices handling paperwork and coordinating supplies, were questioning the military value of someone they knew nothing about. They saw only what they wanted to see: a small, quiet woman who didn't fit their image of what a soldier should look like. Jessica's voice rose slightly, clearly intended for Sarah to hear every word. "I just think there should be higher standards, you know? This isn't summer camp. People's lives depend on everyone doing their job properly. When you have weak links in the chain, the whole system suffers." The comment about weak links hit Sarah particularly hard. Throughout her career, she had been anything but weak. She had pushed herself harder than anyone around her, driven by a need to prove that appearances could be deceiving. But these women would never see past their own prejudices to recognize that truth. As Sarah rinsed the soap from her body, she caught a glimpse of herself in the fogged mirror across the room. The reflection showed exactly what others saw: a small woman with unremarkable features and a tendency to fade into the background. What the mirror couldn't show was the steel determination that had carried her through challenges these women couldn't imagine. The 3 women were now discussing their weekend plans, their attention having moved away from Sarah temporarily, but the damage was done. Their words hung in the steamy air like a toxic cloud, poisoning what should have been a simple, peaceful moment. Sarah turned off the water and reached for her towel, her movements careful and controlled. She had learned long ago that the best response to cruelty was dignity. She wouldn't give them the reaction they were hoping for, wouldn't provide them with entertainment or validation for their behavior. But as she dried herself and prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't help but think about the bitter irony of their conversation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities for people to underestimate her. It always did. What these women didn't know, what nobody on this base knew, was that their assumptions about her were about to be shattered in the most spectacular way possible. The shower room fell silent as Sarah gathered her belongings and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the three women continued their conversation, completely unaware that they had just humiliated one of the most dangerous and highly trained individuals on the entire base. Their ignorance would make the coming revelation all the more shocking. The alarm clock buzzed at 04:30 hours, but Sarah was already awake. She had learned years ago to wake naturally before any alarm, a habit that had saved her life more times than she could count. In the darkness of her small quarters, she moved with the fluid precision of someone whose every action was purposeful and practiced. Her morning routine was exact and unchanging. Physical training began before dawn, when the base was still quiet and she could push her body to its limits without drawing attention. While other personnel slept peacefully in their beds, Sarah was already completing her 3rd mile on the running track that circled the perimeter of the facility. Her pace was steady but demanding, each footfall silent despite the speed. Years of specialized training had taught her to move like a shadow, whether she was crossing hostile territory or simply completing her morning run. Other early risers occasionally spotted her lean figure cutting through the morning mist, but none of them suspected the true nature of her capabilities. After her run, Sarah headed to the weight room in the fitness center. The facility was nearly empty at this hour, occupied only by a few dedicated fitness enthusiasts and shift workers ending their overnight duties. She preferred it this way: no crowds, no conversations, no opportunities for people to make assumptions about her based on appearances. Her workout routine would have impressed even the most dedicated athletes on the base. She moved through exercises with technical precision, her form perfect and her focus absolute. Every movement was calculated to maintain the peak physical condition required for her actual duties that none of her fellow personnel could imagine. The previous evening's encounter in the shower had left its mark, but not in the way those women might have expected. Rather than feeling defeated or humiliated, Sarah found herself thinking about the vast gap between perception and reality. She had built her entire career on that gap, using people's assumptions about her as both shield and weapon. As she completed her strength training, Sarah's mind wandered to her upcoming assignment. Tomorrow would bring a mission briefing that would remind her why she had chosen this path, why she had sacrificed so much to become one of the most elite operators in the military. The women from the shower would probably spend their day filing reports and answering emails, blissfully unaware of the real battles being fought to keep them safe. The fitness center began to fill with other personnel as the morning progressed. Sarah recognized several faces from around the base, people who worked in various administrative and support roles. They nodded politely when they saw her, offering the kind of casual acknowledgement reserved for familiar strangers. None of them looked at her with suspicion or curiosity, which was exactly how she preferred it. Her cover identity was perfect in its ordinariness. According to official records accessible to most base personnel, she worked in a mid-level administrative position, handling classified document processing. The job description was deliberately vague and boring, designed to discourage curiosity while providing plausible explanation for her presence in restricted areas and her irregular schedule. The truth was far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. Sarah's real job required skills that took years to develop, and a level of commitment that few people could sustain. She had undergone training that pushed the human body and mind to their absolute limits, emerging as one of the most capable operators in a field where capability meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. After completing her workout, Sarah returned to her quarters to prepare for the day ahead. Her living space was Spartan but comfortable, containing only essential items and a few carefully chosen personal belongings. The walls were bare except for a single framed photograph, showing her with her family during happier times, before her career had created distance that couldn't be bridged with phone calls and holiday visits. She dressed in the standard uniform worn by administrative personnel, making sure every detail was regulation perfect. The uniform fit her small frame well, but it was deliberately unremarkable. Nothing that would draw attention or suggest anything beyond basic military competence. Her appearance was designed to inspire neither confidence nor concern, just comfortable indifference. The breakfast hall was crowded with personnel beginning their day. Sarah grabbed a simple meal and found a seat in a quiet corner where she could observe without being observed. The conversations around her covered the usual topics: upcoming leave, base politics, complaints about regulations and procedures. Normal people discussing normal problems, unaware of the extraordinary individual sitting just a few tables away. She noticed Jessica, Maria, and Amanda at a table near the center of the room, their voices carrying clearly through the dining area. They were discussing the previous evening with obvious amusement, replaying their cruel comments about the weak woman they had encountered in the showers. Their laughter was sharp and mean-spirited, exactly what Sarah had expected from people who found entertainment in others' perceived shortcomings. "I felt almost sorry for her," Maria was saying between bites of her breakfast. "She looked so pathetic and helpless. I wonder what she even does here. Probably something completely unimportant that they could assign to anyone." Amanda nodded enthusiastically. "Right? I bet she's one of those people who got into the military because they couldn't handle the real world. You know the type, looking for structure and security because they're too weak to make it on their own." Their conversation continued in the same vein, each woman adding her own observations about Sarah's perceived inadequacies. They spoke with the confidence of people who had never been tested, never faced real danger, never had to make decisions where lives hung in the balance. Their worst professional challenge was probably a difficult supervisor or complex scheduling conflict. Sarah finished her breakfast and left the dining hall without acknowledging the three women or their ongoing commentary. She had more important things to focus on than the opinions of people whose understanding of military service began and ended with their comfortable desk jobs. The morning was dedicated to routine administrative duties that provided cover for her real work. She attended meetings, processed paperwork, and maintained the careful facade that allowed her to operate without detection. Every interaction was carefully managed to reinforce the impression of competent but unremarkable service. But even as she played her role perfectly, Sarah's mind was already moving ahead to the mission briefing scheduled for later that afternoon. Soon her dual existence would converge in ways that would shock everyone who thought they knew her. The revelation would be particularly stunning for three women who had built their entertainment on her supposed weakness. The classified briefing room was located deep within the most secure section of the base, accessible only to personnel with the highest levels of clearance. Sarah approached the entrance with the same casual demeanor she displayed everywhere else, but her identification badge contained security codes that opened doors few people on the base even knew existed. The hallway leading to the briefing room was monitored by multiple surveillance systems and patrolled by guards whose training went far beyond standard military police protocols. These men and women were handpicked for their discretion and their ability to recognize threats that others might miss. They nodded respectfully as Sarah passed, their acknowledgement carrying a weight that would have surprised anyone who knew her only from her public persona. Inside the briefing room, a dozen individuals waited in comfortable chairs arranged around a conference table, equipped with the most advanced communication technology available. These were not typical military personnel. Their bearing and alertness marked them as something far more specialized and dangerous. Each person in the room had undergone years of training that pushed human capabilities to their absolute limits. Sarah took her seat at the head of the table, and the transformation was immediate and striking. The quiet, unassuming woman who had endured mockery in the shower just hours earlier was gone, replaced by a figure of unmistakable authority and competence. Her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened, and her entire presence commanded the room in a way that left no doubt about who was in charge. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room despite its quiet tone. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention, and the window for action is extremely narrow. Intelligence sources have confirmed that a high-value target will be accessible for approximately 6 hours, beginning at 2200 hours tomorrow." The team members around the table listened with absolute focus, taking notes and absorbing every detail of the mission parameters. These were individuals who had served in the most dangerous locations on Earth, who had completed operations that would never appear in any official records. They understood that the woman briefing them had earned her position through demonstrated excellence under the most extreme conditions possible. Sarah activated the room's display systems, revealing satellite imagery and detailed intelligence reports that painted a picture of exceptional complexity and danger. The target was located in a heavily fortified compound, surrounded by hostile forces, accessible only through terrain that would challenge even the most experienced operators. Success would require perfect coordination, flawless execution, and the kind of leadership that could adapt to changing circumstances without hesitation. Our primary objective is extraction of the target without compromise to his current location or status, Sarah continued, using a laser pointer to highlight key features of the operational area. Secondary objectives include gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities and establishing surveillance assets for future operations. Failure is not an option. Too many lives depend on the information this individual can provide. The mission details were staggering in their complexity. The team would need to infiltrate enemy territory, navigate multiple layers of security, locate and extract the target, and escape without leaving any trace of their presence. It was the kind of operation that existed only in movies for most people, but for this team, it was simply another day at work. Each team member received specific assignments based on their unique skills and experience. The demolitions expert would handle any obstacles requiring explosive solutions. The communications specialist would maintain contact with headquarters and coordinate with supporting assets. The medic would ensure everyone returned home safely, no matter what challenges they faced during the operation. But it was Sarah's role that would have shocked anyone who thought they knew her. As mission commander, she would lead the team into hostile territory, make split-second decisions under fire, and take responsibility for bringing everyone home alive. The woman who had been dismissed as weak and useless would be directing one of the most dangerous and important operations currently being conducted by American forces. The briefing continued for over 2 hours, covering every conceivable scenario and contingency. Sarah's knowledge of tactics, weapons, and enemy capabilities was encyclopedic, and her ability to synthesize complex information into actionable plans was nothing short of extraordinary. The team members asked detailed questions, and she provided answers that demonstrated not just theoretical knowledge, but hard-won experience from countless previous operations. Equipment loadout will be finalized tonight after we receive the latest intelligence updates, Sarah explained as the briefing moved toward conclusion. Transportation to the staging area begins at 0600 hours, and we'll have a final communications check at 2000 hours before moving to our insertion point. Are there any questions about the mission parameters? The team had worked together many times before, and their trust in Sarah's leadership was absolute. They had seen her navigate impossible situations, make decisions under pressure that saved lives, and demonstrate the kind of courage that inspired others to push beyond their own perceived limitations. To them, she wasn't a small, quiet woman who might break under pressure. She was a proven warrior who had earned their respect through actions rather than words. As the briefing concluded and team members began filing out of the room, Sarah remained behind to review additional intelligence reports that had arrived during their meeting. The information painted an even more challenging picture than originally anticipated. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, she found herself energized by the complexity of the task ahead. This was what she had trained for, what she had sacrificed so much to achieve. While other people her age were focused on career advancement and social relationships, she had dedicated herself to becoming someone capable of handling situations where failure meant not just personal defeat but potential catastrophe for innocent people around the world. Her phone buzzed with a routine message about base activities, a reminder that her dual existence required constant attention to both sides of her identity. Tomorrow, after completing one of the most dangerous missions currently being undertaken by American forces, she would return to her cover role and endure more assumptions about her weakness and irrelevance. The irony was delicious in its completeness. While Jessica, Maria, and Amanda would spend their evening watching television or socializing in the base recreation facilities, Sarah would be preparing for an operation that would test every skill she had developed over years of training. They would sleep peacefully in their beds while she led a team into harm's way to protect people who would never know her name or understand the sacrifices made on their behalf. But soon, very soon, the gap between perception and reality would be revealed in a way that would forever change how everyone on the base saw the quiet woman they had so easily dismissed. The mission launch was scheduled for the middle of the night, when most of the base would be asleep and the chances of unwanted observation were minimal. Sarah spent the evening hours in final preparation, checking equipment, reviewing intelligence updates, and mentally rehearsing every aspect of the operation that lay ahead. Her quarters transformed into a tactical planning center as she laid out specialized gear that would have amazed anyone who thought they knew her capabilities. Advanced communications equipment, night vision devices, weapon systems that required extensive training to operate effectively, and survival gear designed for the most hostile environments on Earth filled every available surface. Each piece of equipment had been personally selected and modified based on lessons learned from previous operations. The rifle she would carry had been customized specifically for her physical dimensions and shooting preferences, its accuracy tested under conditions that simulated the stress and chaos of actual combat. Her body armor was lightweight but capable of stopping threats that would incapacitate most people. And her medical kit contained supplies that could keep someone alive long enough to reach proper medical facilities. At 0200 hours, Sarah made her way to the secure staging area where her team was making final preparations. The transformation from her daytime persona was now complete. Gone was any trace of the quiet, unassuming woman who worked in administration. In her place stood a figure of deadly competence, someone whose very presence radiated the confidence that comes from years of successful operations under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. The team members were applying face paint and conducting last-minute equipment checks when she arrived. These were individuals who had served together through countless operations, who trusted each other with their lives on a regular basis. Their easy familiarity and obvious mutual respect spoke to the bonds forged through shared experiences that civilians could never understand. Weather. Update shows clear skies for the next 8 hours, reported Martinez, the team's communications specialist. Satellite coverage will be optimal for our insertion route, and enemy patrol patterns are consistent with our intelligence projections. All systems are green for launch. Thompson, the demolitions expert, looked up from his equipment inspection with a grin. Charges are prepped and ready for anything we might encounter. If we need to make a door where there isn't one, I've got us covered. This should be a textbook operation if the intelligence holds up. Sarah nodded approvingly as she conducted her own final equipment check. Every piece of gear had been tested and retested. Every contingency planned for and rehearsed. But she knew from experience that even the most careful preparation couldn't account for every variable they might encounter once the operation began. The insertion would be conducted by helicopter, flying at low altitude through terrain that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. The aircraft and crew had been specially selected for this mission, their capabilities matching the demands of an operation that required precision timing and absolute discretion. As the team moved toward the helicopter landing pad, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded every major operation. This was the moment when all the training, all the preparation, all the sacrifices made sense. Everything she had endured, including the cruel comments and assumptions about her weakness, had led to this point where she would prove her value in the most definitive way possible. The helicopter was a modified version designed for special operations. Its engines muffled and its exterior painted in colors that would make it nearly invisible against the night sky. The pilot and co-pilot were specialists in low-altitude flying, their skills honed through years of supporting the most dangerous missions conducted by American forces. Flight time to target area is approximately 90 minutes, the pilot reported, as the team strapped themselves into their seats. Weather is holding steady, and we have confirmed clearance through all necessary airspace. Communications with headquarters will be maintained until we reach the radio silence boundary. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, immediately turning toward their destination while staying well below radar coverage. Sarah used the flight time to review the mission plan one final time, ensuring that every team member understood their role and the contingencies that might require adaptation of their original strategy. Below them, the landscape changed from populated areas to increasingly remote terrain. The target location was in a region where government control was tenuous at best, where armed groups operated with virtual impunity, and outsiders were viewed with immediate suspicion. It was exactly the kind of environment where Sarah's team excelled, where their specialized training and experience provided decisive advantages over conventional forces. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a small clearing that had been identified through satellite reconnaissance as providing the best balance between concealment and accessibility. The pilot's skill was evident as he brought the aircraft down in complete darkness, using only the most minimal lighting to avoid detection by anyone who might be watching. 30 seconds to touchdown, came the pilot's voice through their headsets. Weather remains clear, and no hostile activity has been detected in the immediate area. Good hunting, and we'll see you at the extraction point. Sarah felt the familiar calm that always settled over her in the moments before action began. All the preparation was complete, all the planning was finished, and now it was time to prove once again that appearances could be devastatingly deceiving. The quiet woman who had been mocked for her perceived weakness was about to lead a mission that required courage, skill, and leadership abilities that her critics couldn't begin to imagine. The helicopter touched down with barely a whisper, and the team moved out immediately. Within seconds, they had disappeared into the darkness, leaving no trace of their arrival except for the fading sound of rotor blades as the aircraft departed for its holding position. Sarah activated her night vision equipment and began moving toward their first checkpoint, her team following in precise formation behind her. The mission that would define their success or failure had officially begun, and somewhere back at the base, 3 women slept peacefully, completely unaware that the person they had ridiculed was now leading one of the most important operations currently being conducted anywhere in the world. The mission unfolded with precision that would have impressed even the most experienced military observers. Sarah led her team through hostile territory with the confidence of someone who had navigated similar terrain countless times before, her movements silent and efficient as they approached their target location. The compound housing their objective was exactly as described in the intelligence briefings, heavily fortified, well guarded, and positioned to make unauthorized access extremely difficult. But Sarah had built her reputation on accomplishing missions that others considered impossible, and this operation would be no exception. Using hand signals refined through years of working together, she directed her team into position around the perimeter. Each member moved to their assigned location with practiced ease, their specialized equipment allowing them to maintain constant communication despite the need for absolute silence. The extraction proceeded flawlessly, demonstrating the kind of teamwork that could only be achieved through extensive training and complete trust in leadership. Within 40 minutes of arriving at the target location, they were moving toward their extraction point with their objective secured, and no indication that their presence had been detected. The helicopter pickup occurred exactly on schedule, the pilot's skill once again evident as he maneuvered the aircraft in conditions that would challenge any aviator. As they lifted off and began the journey back to base, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction at another successful mission, completed without casualties or complications. But even as they flew through the darkness toward home, she knew that the most challenging part of her dual existence was about to begin. In a few hours, she would need to transform back into the quiet, unremarkable woman who worked in administration, hiding all evidence of the extraordinary capabilities she had just demonstrated. The return to base occurred in the early morning hours, when most personnel were still asleep and the chances of unwanted observation were minimal. The team dispersed quickly after landing, each member returning to their cover identities and the careful deception that allowed them to operate without detection. Sarah made her way back to her quarters, where she began the process of becoming her public persona once again. The specialized equipment was carefully stored in hidden compartments that would pass even detailed inspection, and her mission gear was replaced with the standard uniforms worn by administrative personnel. By the time the base began stirring with morning activity, no trace remained of the night's operation. Sarah appeared for breakfast looking exactly like the quiet, unassuming woman who had been mocked in the showers just 2 days earlier. Her transformation was so complete that even people who had served alongside her for months would never suspect her true capabilities. The dining hall was buzzing with Conversation about routine base activities and weekend plans. Sarah took her usual seat in a quiet corner, observing the normal flow of military life, while concealing the fact that she had just returned from one of the most successful operations conducted in recent months. Jessica, Maria, and Amanda were at their regular table, their conversation focusing on complaints about their supervisors and speculation about upcoming personnel changes. They seemed completely absorbed in their small world of office politics and social dynamics, unaware that someone they had dismissed as worthless had just completed a mission that would never appear in any public records. "I heard there was some kind of helicopter activity last night," Maria mentioned between bites of her breakfast. "Probably just training exercises, but it woke me up around 3 in the morning. Don't they realize that some of us need our beauty sleep?" Amanda laughed at the comment, clearly finding humor in the idea that military operations should be scheduled around her personal comfort. "Right? Sometimes I think they forget that not everyone here is trying to play soldier. Some of us are just doing our jobs and want to be left alone." Their casual dismissal of military activities, that might have included life or death situations, was exactly what Sarah had come to expect from people who had never faced real danger. They viewed the military as simply another workplace, complete with predictable schedules and minimal personal risk. But even as she listened to their conversation, Sarah was already focusing on the next phase of her assignment. The successful extraction had provided intelligence that would require immediate analysis and action, and her role in that process would be crucial to preventing potential threats to American interests. The morning proceeded with the usual routine of administrative duties that provided cover for her real work. She attended meetings, processed paperwork, and maintained the careful facade that allowed her to operate without suspicion. Every interaction was carefully managed to reinforce the impression of competent but unremarkable service. But the intelligence gathered during the previous night's mission was already being analyzed by specialists who understood its significance. The information would lead to additional operations, some of which would require Sarah's direct involvement in leadership. The quiet woman eating breakfast in the corner would soon be planning and executing missions that would have global implications. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself thinking about the strange duality of her existence. In one world, she was dismissed as weak and irrelevant, someone whose contributions were questioned and whose presence was barely tolerated. In another world, she was respected as one of the most capable operators in the most elite units of the American military. The contrast was particularly striking when she considered the women who had mocked her in the shower. They would spend their day handling routine administrative tasks, their biggest challenge likely to be a difficult phone call or a complex scheduling conflict. They had no concept of the real dangers that existed in the world, or the sacrifices made by others to keep them safe. Yet their cruel comments had served as a reminder of why her cover identity was so effective. People saw exactly what they expected to see, and their assumptions provided the perfect camouflage for someone whose real capabilities would shock them beyond belief. The afternoon brought news that the mission's intelligence had already proven valuable, leading to actionable information about threats that were being neutralized before they could develop into serious dangers. Sarah's team had prevented attacks that would have cost innocent lives, though their success would never be publicly acknowledged or celebrated. As evening approached and she prepared for another routine day tomorrow, Sarah reflected on the strange satisfaction that came from serving without recognition. While others sought credit and advancement, she found fulfillment in knowing that her work made a real difference in ways that most people would never understand or appreciate. 3 weeks after the successful mission, life on the base had returned to its normal rhythm. Sarah continued her dual existence, maintaining her cover identity while preparing for future operations that would once again test her skills and leadership capabilities. The intelligence gathered during the recent extraction had already led to several follow-up missions, each one contributing to a larger strategy that few people were authorized to understand. But the careful balance between her two worlds was about to be disrupted in a way that no one could have anticipated. A routine security briefing had been scheduled for all base personnel, covering new protocols and procedures that would affect everyone from the highest-ranking officers to the newest recruits. The briefing was mandatory for all personnel, regardless of their clearance level or job responsibilities. Sarah found herself sitting in the base auditorium alongside hundreds of other military members, including Jessica, Maria, and Amanda, who had taken seats several rows ahead of her usual position in the back. Colonel Richardson, the base commander, took the stage with his characteristic no-nonsense demeanor. He was a respected leader who had earned his position through decades of distinguished service, and his briefings were known for their directness and practical focus. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system. "Today's briefing covers several important topics, but I want to begin by recognizing some outstanding achievements that deserve your attention and respect." Sarah felt a familiar unease as the colonel's words registered. Recognition ceremonies were always dangerous for someone maintaining a cover identity, and she had specifically requested that her contributions remain classified and unacknowledged. But military bureaucracy sometimes operated independently of individual preferences. Over the past month, our base has been home to several operations that have had significant impact on national security. Colonel Richardson continued. "While most details must remain classified, I can share that these missions have prevented multiple threats and gathered intelligence that has already saved lives." The audience listened with polite attention, most personnel assuming that the colonel was referring to operations conducted by units stationed elsewhere or visiting teams that had used their base as a staging area. Few people present had any reason to suspect that one of their own colleagues might be involved in such high-level activities. The success of these operations has been due in large part to exceptional leadership and tactical expertise, the colonel said, pausing to consult his notes. "Today I have the honor of recognizing someone whose contributions have been extraordinary, even by the standards of our most elite units." Sarah's stomach dropped as she realized where this presentation was heading. Despite her requests for anonymity, someone had decided that recognition was appropriate and necessary. The careful cover identity she had maintained for months was about to be shattered in front of the entire base population. Commander Sarah Mitchell has demonstrated leadership, courage, and tactical brilliance that exemplifies the very best of American military service, Colonel Richardson announced, his words echoing through the suddenly silent auditorium. Her recent mission leadership resulted in the successful completion of objectives that many considered impossible. The auditorium erupted in surprised murmurs as hundreds of heads turned to locate the person being recognized. Sarah remained seated, hoping against hope that she could somehow avoid the attention that was about to transform her life on the base forever. But Colonel Richardson was not finished with his presentation. "Commander Mitchell's background includes graduation from some of our most demanding training programs, successful completion of missions in the most hostile environments on Earth, and leadership of teams composed of our most elite operators. Jessica, Maria, and Amanda were among the many personnel frantically scanning the auditorium, trying to identify the celebrated hero who had been working alongside them without their knowledge. Their faces showed confusion and growing curiosity as they searched for someone who matched their expectations of what a decorated special operations commander should look like. Commander Mitchell, would you please stand so that your colleagues can properly acknowledge your achievements? Colonel Richardson requested, his tone making it clear that this was not really a request but a direct order from a superior officer. Sarah had no choice but to comply. She rose slowly from her seat in the back of the auditorium, her movement immediately drawing the attention of everyone present. A wave of gasps and shocked exclamations swept through the crowd as people recognized the quiet, unassuming woman they had barely noticed. The reaction from Jessica, Maria, and Amanda was particularly dramatic. Their faces showed a progression of emotions from confusion to disbelief to horror, as they realized the identity of the person being honored. The woman they had mocked and belittled, the person they had dismissed as weak and useless, was being recognized as one of the most accomplished operators in the military. Commander Mitchell's most recent operation involved the extraction of a high-value target from hostile territory under extremely dangerous conditions, Colonel Richardson continued, seemingly unaware of the shock his announcement was causing. Her tactical planning and leadership resulted in complete mission success with no casualties or complications. The auditorium fell into stunned silence as the implications of this revelation sank in. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet woman who worked in administration, the person many had barely noticed, was actually a decorated special operations commander whose missions involved life and death situations that most of them couldn't imagine. For Jessica, Maria, and Amanda, the revelation was particularly devastating. Their cruel comments about Sarah's perceived weakness and irrelevance now seemed not just wrong, but grotesquely inappropriate. They had mocked someone whose courage and capabilities far exceeded anything they could understand or appreciate. The woman they had dismissed as a weak link in the military chain was actually one of its strongest and most valuable assets. While they handled routine paperwork and administrative tasks, she had been leading missions that protected national security and saved innocent lives. Their assumptions about her had been not just incorrect, but laughably, embarrassingly wrong. As the applause began and built to a thunderous ovation, Sarah remained standing with the same quiet dignity she had always displayed. She nodded acknowledgement to her colleagues, her expression revealing nothing of the complex emotions she felt it. Having her carefully maintained cover identity destroyed the three women, who had found such entertainment in belittling her, now faced the uncomfortable reality of their own ignorance and cruelty. They had revealed themselves as people who judged others based on superficial appearances, who found pleasure in what they perceived as others' weaknesses, and who completely failed to recognize true strength and capability when it stood right in front of them. The days following the recognition ceremony transformed life on the base in ways that no one could have anticipated. Sarah found herself at the center of attention wherever she went, with personnel who had previously overlooked her now approaching with respect, curiosity, and sometimes embarrassment about their past assumptions. The change was most dramatic in her interactions with Jessica, Maria, and Amanda. The three women who had once found entertainment in mocking her now struggled with the humiliating realization of how completely wrong they had been. Their cruel comments about her weakness and irrelevance had been exposed as the ignorant judgments of people who understood nothing about real strength or military service. Jessica was the first to attempt an apology, approaching Sarah in the dining hall with obvious discomfort and shame. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by the hesitation of someone who knew they had behaved badly and wasn't sure how to make amends. "Commander Mitchell," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I wanted to apologize for my comments the other night. I had no idea about your background or your service record. I was completely out of line, and I'm truly sorry." Sarah looked at her with the same calm expression she had always worn, showing no sign of anger or vindictiveness. "Apology accepted, Jessica. We all make assumptions sometimes. The important thing is learning from our mistakes and treating others with respect, regardless of what we think we know about them." The response was gracious but pointed, making it clear that Sarah understood exactly what had motivated their previous behavior. She wasn't interested in making them suffer for their ignorance, but she also wouldn't pretend that their cruelty had been acceptable or justified. Maria and Amanda offered similar apologies over the following days, both women clearly struggling with the embarrassment of having revealed themselves as people who found pleasure in others' perceived shortcomings. Their assumptions about Sarah had exposed their own character flaws in ways that would follow them for the rest of their time on the base. The broader base population reacted with a mixture of awe and curiosity about Sarah's true background. Stories began circulating about her training and experience, most of them wildly inaccurate, but all reflecting a new respect for someone they had previously overlooked. The quiet woman who had blended into the background was now recognized as one of the most accomplished individuals on the entire facility. Colonel Richardson requested a private meeting with Sarah to discuss the impact of the public recognition on her future operations. They met in his office, where he expressed both admiration for her service record and concern about the challenges that increased visibility might create. "I want you to know that the recognition was well-deserved and long overdue," he told her. "Your contributions have been extraordinary, and it was important for the base personnel to understand the caliber of people serving alongside them. However, I'm aware that exposure can complicate future assignments." Sarah nodded her understanding. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the recognition, though I've always preferred to let my work speak for itself. As for future operations, I'm confident that we can adapt our procedures to maintain operational security, regardless of my current profile." Her professionalism and adaptability impressed the colonel, reinforcing his respect for someone who could handle both combat operations and administrative challenges with equal competence. He made arrangements for her to transfer to assignments where her exposed status would be less problematic, ensuring that her unique skills would continue to benefit military operations. The revelation also had unexpected positive effects throughout the base. Personnel began paying more attention to their colleagues, recognizing that appearances could be deceiving, and that everyone deserved respect, regardless of their perceived status or role. The lesson about judging others based on assumptions resonated far beyond Sarah's specific situation. For Sarah herself, the end of her cover identity brought both relief and new challenges. She no longer had to maintain the careful deception that had defined her daily life for months, but she also lost the anonymity that had allowed her to move freely without unwanted attention or expectations. The three women who had mocked her served as a constant reminder of how wrong people could be when they let prejudice and superficial judgments guide their behavior. Their embarrassment was obvious whenever they encountered her, and their attempts to overcompensate for their previous cruelty only highlighted the depth of their earlier misjudgment. But Sarah harbored no resentment toward them or anyone else who had underestimated her. She understood that their behavior had revealed more about their own character than about hers, and she was content to let their embarrassment serve as its own punishment and lesson. In quiet moments, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this point. The years of training, the dangerous missions, the careful maintenance of dual identities had all led to this revelation that would reshape how others saw her. But fundamentally, she remained the same person. She had always been someone committed to serving others, regardless of whether that service was recognized or appreciated. The story of the quiet woman, who had been mocked in the showers only to be revealed as an elite military commander, became legendary on the base. It served as a powerful reminder that strength comes in many forms, that appearances can be devastatingly deceiving, and that true worth is measured by actions rather than assumptions. Years later, when Jessica, Maria, and Amanda had moved on to other assignments, they would still remember the lesson they learned about the dangers of judging others based on superficial impressions. The woman they had dismissed as weak and irrelevant had taught them something about respect, humility, and the complex nature of human capability that would influence their interactions with others for the rest of their lives. For Sarah, the experience reinforced her understanding that the most important battles are often fought by people whose contributions go unrecognized and unappreciated. She continued her service with the same quiet dedication that had always defined her approach, secure in the knowledge that real strength doesn't require recognition to be effective and meaningful.